So today I'm going to talk about some of the enhancements that we're making to user-based tunneling as part of AOS-CX 10.06 release. With me today is Yamini Sakuri and Mehabub Kiladar from our engineering team, and they're going to be covering troubleshooting, some of the troubleshooting steps that we can take for this. I'm going to go over, I'll go over the overview, use cases, details, and configuration and best practices, and I'll demo all that, and then I'm going to let them take over troubleshooting and walk you through some troubleshooting steps with the new UBT enhancements. So to begin, for those who may be new to Aruba or who aren't familiar with user-based tunneling, we started user-based tunneling in AOS Switch and we started developing for it, I guess, about 2016. It was released in 2017. When we introduced it with AOS Switch, we had to manually create the VLANs on the switch. And so every time users came online and they wanted to go into a tunnel, you had to manually have a VLAN created for those, whatever the role. So say you have a phone role that uses VLAN 15, you had to have VLAN 15 created on the switch and the gateway. And you also had to assign that VLAN via the user role. All multicast traffic was sent via a multicast tunnel to the gateway or the gateway cluster. We supported both tagged and untagged VLANs with this method. So in early 2018, I believe it was 16.08 release with AOS Switch, we there were a lot of challenges with the original method that we came out with. One, we had there were some concerns about having to manually create the VLANs across all the switches all the time. The other concern was, it could be cumbersome with that. So in 1608, we came out with a reserved VLAN method, which was called UBT 2.0. And with that, we reserved a VLAN on the switch, and it was kind of automatically done once you set the mode and once you set the VLAN to be reserved. AOS Switch automatically created a VLAN to send all that tunneled traffic over. And all that tunneled traffic was sent untagged. You didn't have to have a VLAN assignment anymore at the switch user role, which I'll show you later on. All VLAN assignment was done at the gateway, and then all policy was also done at the gateway. All bum traffic, multicast, broadcast, and unknown unicast traffic was sent to the gateway and was replicated at the gateway and then sent back to the tunneled client via a unicast. So we'd convert the broadcast and multicast to unicast traffic. This worked pretty well. The problem was, and we actually took this method and carried it over to CX in 10.4 when we released the 6300 and 6400 switches. So once moving to 10.4, we still had the reserve VLAN method of tunneling. However, there were still challenges with tagged VLANs. That we have customers that tunnel everything, all types of devices, back to the gateways. And they wanted to be able to send tagged traffic back, especially with VoIP phones. We have some customers that tunnel their phones. They tunnel everything back to the gateways, and so they wanted to be able to support that, being able to send tagged traffic back to the gateway over a wired tunnel to the gateways. So, with that being said, with 10.6, we've brought back UBT, quote unquote, UBT 1.0. We're calling it the VLAN Extend method in CX, which will allow the use for both untagged and tagged VLANs. Now, you can use both. You're not stuck with one or the other. You can't use them simultaneously, but you can choose to use either the VLAN Extend method or you can use the current default method, which is the reserve VLAN method. I think we're calling it the local VLAN method, but I'm gonna try to change. I'm working on changing that to the reserve VLAN method because that's basically what it is. And so I'm going to go over the differences with that and show you how to configure that over the next few minutes. So the big use case for this is a VoIP phone. When we have a PC plugged into a VoIP phone that's being tunneled, the PC will usually go untagged over the data VLAN, and the VoIP phone will be tagged on the voice VLAN. Some customers want both these devices to be tunneled to the gateways. Uh, there might be other devices, some specific maybe medical devices or things like that that have to be tagged to access the services, whatever at the other end of the network. And so they want also, some customers want those devices to be tagged as well. So those who want to tunnel everything want the choice. Customers who want to tunnel everything want the choice to use either tagged or untagged traffic going through the tunnels. So with the VLAN extend method, multicast traffic replication is handled at the switch, not at the gateway. So in UBT 2.0, the gateway replicated as many copies of the multicast data sent back to the switch's unicast. Now it's all being done at the switch and then sent back to the gateway over a multicast tunnel. And as we know, the reserve VLAN mode only supports untagged traffic in CX currently. So some of the enhancements or some of the VLAN extend scale for this, scale hasn't changed. We still support 1,000 tunnels per switch, 256 tunnels per port. The VLAN extend mode still supports a GRE tunnel per device or user or per port. If we have a switch plugged into a port, there's still a unique GRE key that's generated per tunnel. There's also a tunnel that's formed for multicast traffic. You need to make sure that if we're tagging VLANs, that we have them tagged appropriately for uplink or downlink, switch to gateway or gateway to switch for communication. User VLANs must be configured on the switch and the gateway. So we can use NetEdit to automate this now, or Central when we get the NetEdit functionality into Central over the next year or so. We have ways now to automate a lot of this process than we did with AOS switch, so that we can deploy VLANs, multiple VLANs. The switch can be changed between the reserve VLAN and VLAN extend modes. The control plane, data plane still work the same. All the mechanisms still work the same. When you turn on tunneling on the switch, you're still reaching out to the switch anchor gateway. You're still creating the control plane tunnel. As users come online, they will get their user anchor gateways, and each user will have its own tunnel to a specific gateway in the cluster. So as more and more user tunnels come online, they're still going to be balanced out across the cluster. The fundamental mechanisms haven't changed in user-based tunneling. So in VLAN extend mode, which is the mode that's coming out in 10.6, IGMP and multicast traffic is flooded on all ports associated with the VLAN that IGMP is turned on. And then it's sent back. Communication multicast traffic is traverses between the switch and the gateway over a multicast tunnel. So in future releases, 10.6 CPE, 10.7, I think it's still kind of I don't know if it's quite committed yet. We're looking at multi-zone, adding in multi-zone for user-based tunneling, and then also adding in the gateway downloadable role for that. So that's not current with the initial release of 10.6, but it will be at a future date, and so we will provide more details on that as we get closer to the release on that. What's not supported with this is IPv6, IGMP snooping, dynamic VLANs, port-based tunneling, any SNMP MIB support for UBT, and the gateway downloadable role. So the differences between the two configurations here. So on VLAN extend, when we turn that on, we have a new command, this UBT mode, VLAN extend. This is the command that actually turns on this functionality. And then if we did a show UBT, we would see that in the mode. By default, we're on reserved VLAN. That uses the UBT client VLAN. So if you have this configured and you turn on the VLAN extend mode, it's just going to ignore this command. And then if we did a show UBT using the reserve VLAN or default method, you will see it's called local VLAN. The switch calls it local VLAN, but you'll see that in the mode, and then you would see the VLAN specified. So note that this is the default state of that. You still need the source interface on both of these methods of doing this. What it looks like in the from the gateway side for this, if we look at a tunnel on the gateway, we can see that everything is all on one tunnel. And we can see the flags here. It's converting, the big one here is converting broadcast and multicast to unicast traffic as part of this tunnel. So this is the tunnel on the gateway. If we look at with the new mode, the VLAN extend mode, we can see that there's a separate multicast tunnel that's now been formed. And we can see that with the flags that it's using the switch anchor controller or gateway tunnel is a multicast tunnel on this. So those are the main differences between the two modes of doing this. So steps to configure, as we're familiar with configuring UBT, you got to have the UBT profile. You got to configure the appropriate UBT mode, source interface, configure the primary role, so the switch role, and then the gateway role as well. So we have to make sure the switch role is there to initiate the tunneling, and that the gateway role is there to assign the VLAN or make sure it goes into the appropriate VLAN, and that we have the appropriate policies ready to go for the tunnel clients. We also need to make sure we have the radius server configured for authentication. If we're using downloadable roles, we have to make sure we have the ClearPass credentials set appropriately for that. And this is all in my white paper, how to do this. So how to configure basic user-based tunneling. We also have to make sure we have authentication turned on the ports, and that we have the uplink port correctly configured so that the tunnel traffic can get to the gateways. On the gateway, we have to make sure that we have the role specified and then the VLAN specified. So how we do this is we configure the UBT profile. We have to specify the gateway IP. So once we specify the IP and then turn on the tunneling mechanism, the switch downloads the bucket map and creates the connection between the switch and the gateway. So the switch now has the cluster map for all the gateways. So as users come online, they will be balanced out appropriately across the gateways. We have these interval heartbeat commands that we can adjust. There's might be potential network latency or packet loss issues in the network. We can adjust the intervals to make sure the heartbeats get there faster between the switch and the gateway. Default is best practice, of course. And then if we want to remove or add a new gateway IP, we would just put the no command in front of the gateway IP, and then run the gateway IP again with a new IP. To disable UBT, you just do a no enable in the gateway zone command. If you need to modify the intervals, you would just put the interval command and then change the value. If you're running PAPI security, you just either enter the PAPI security key or so PAPI security key. PAPI is the protocol that the switch and the controller, it's an Aruba proprietary protocol that the switch and the gateway use to communicate control plane messages and heartbeats over. So we can secure those messages with a hash key. This is the command to do it, this PAPI-security-key command. To completely remove the UBT profile, just do a no UBT. That completely removes it from there. And then you configure your modes, whether you're doing the local or reserve VLAN mode or the VLAN extend mode. So if we're doing the local VLAN or reserve VLAN mode, we would specify the VLAN that we're going to use, make sure it's not shut down. Then we would specify that that will be the client VLAN or the reserve VLAN that the traffic will go over. To remove that, you just put a no command in front of it. If we're using the VLAN extend mode, we would do this UBT mode command. So the UBT mode command only has one. There's only one option, VLAN extend. So if you want to go back to reserved VLAN, you just do no UBT mode. So there's no UBT mode, reserve VLAN, or local VLAN. It's just UBT mode, VLAN extend. That's for the tagged VLAN method. So if you want to remove that, you just do no UBT mode. I'll show you on the switch in just a second here. We got to make sure we have the UBT source interface, and then we have to make sure we have our user roles appropriately configured for that. Got to make sure we have radius server configured, so make sure we have ClearPass if we're doing downloadable roles. The right appropriate credentials. So remember, you either put a downloadable role user on ClearPass or a read-only admin user on ClearPass to use downloadable roles. And then you got to turn on either MacAuth or .1x or both at the interface. If you're using both, you want to learn more about concurrent authentication. Refer to the last TOI session. Yash did a great presentation on concurrent authentication. So that'll give you all the details you need for concurrent authentication. And we make sure we have our uplinks configured correctly. They're on the appropriate VLAN or the appropriate routed port that we're getting up, that we have the connectivity from the switch to the gateways. First thing we want to do is verify. Once we get the UBT profile configured, we want to verify the state. So really, when we do a show UBT state, we're looking for the gateways to be registered. If there's not registered, there's an issue somewhere. It's either a connectivity issue, it could be a licensing issue. You don't have the AP license on the gateway or mobility master that is reserved, or you don't have enough AP licenses for the switch to consume. It could be you don't have the source interface, correct source interface specified, or you don't, if you're using maybe a reserve VLAN method, you don't have the reserve VLAN set correctly. If you're using the VLAN extend method, the VLAN may not be existing on the switch for it to form the tunnel. Uh, as always, when you're trying to troubleshoot, you always want to, or you're trying to verify, always first thing, verify show port access clients, that the client was authenticated and then it was able to get a role. That's your first step. If it's not getting a role, then you might need to go check the role. Sometimes if you're doing tunneling and the role doesn't get quite authenticated, you want to check the gateway role, make sure it's correctly configured in the tunneling command. Because if the switch can't complete the tunnel, it won't authenticate the client. It'll show up as failed. So, want to check, make sure all those steps in between are correctly configured. I personally recommend for troubleshooting, start out with a non-tunneled role, just assign a VLAN. Make sure that the downloadable role works first with a VLAN, and then once you've correctly done that, you can remove the VLAN and put in the tunneling command if you're doing the reserve VLAN method. If you're doing the VLAN extend method, uh, you leave the VLAN in there, but make sure the tunneling command is working as well appropriately. And then do a show UBT all, and that will show you that the user tunnels are appropriately formed, and you're looking for the tunnel status to be activated. So yeah, between the two modes, the two differences between the VLAN extend and the reserve VLAN, you're going to be looking at the UBT mode command or the UBT client command. Those are the main differences between the two. And then show IP source interface for UBT. You want to make sure that's the correct source interface for that. Show UBT information will show you the bucket map. This will go off the screen, but I cut it here, but it'll show you all the bucket IDs. So all the hashing of where all the users will go to which gateways in the cluster. As hundreds and hundreds of users come online, they will be balanced out appropriately and fairly equally across all the gateways. Statistics, show UBT statistics will show you the heartbeats between the switch and the gateways. So if you're seeing heartbeats being transmitted but not received, there's probably a connectivity issue somewhere, and you'll need to go troubleshoot that. So that's a useful command to see. Some of the best practices with this, if you're going to make any changes, like a UBT mode change, if you're going to change between the reserve VLAN or VLAN extend mode, if you're going to change the source interface IP or VLAN, or if you're going to change the reserve VLAN or UBT client VLAN, disable the UBT profile. So you'll go to the UBT profile and do a no enable, make your changes, and then re-enable that. Make sure jumbos are enabled. It's still recommended that we do jumbos, um, because we have 46 byte header. So if you're, getting up to, 1476 bytes in a packet, the client's sending those out, and you might hit jumbo, you might hit 1519 frame size, the switch will drop that packet. So, it's recommended that we have jumbos enabled. If you're going to use the VLAN extend method, you'll want 10.6, AOS-CX 10.6 or later. For reserve VLAN, 10.4 or later. The gateway should have 8.4, I think, is the recommended build for the gateway code to be running user-based tunneling. So let's jump into the demo, and I can show you in real time what the differences in the commands look like. First, I wanted to start out with a user role. So this is kind of what a user role would look like with the reserve VLAN method. Notice there's no gateway
We
zone.
can't see your screen.
Oh, all right. Is it still? Oh, I stopped sharing.
No worries.
Thanks. I wondered why my laser pointer disappeared. Okay. How about now? Now can you see it?
Yeah, that's good, Justin. Thanks.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Sorry about that. Okay, so reserve VLAN method. You don't need a VLAN if you're using a reserve VLAN because everything's going to get tunneled over the client VLAN, the UBT client VLAN or reserve VLAN, and sent to the gateway, and then the gateway will assign the VLAN. So in a user role, you might have your policy here, and then you would just have the gateway zone command, which starts the tunneling, and then you'd have your gateway role set. Now with the VLAN extend method, log back into ClearPass. With the VLAN extend method, you will have your VLAN configured as part of the switch user role. The reason we do that, you can see here, VLAN access 15. The reason you need to do that is because we're extending those VLANs all the way down so we can pass tag traffic back if we need to. So you'll need to have the VLAN exist on the switch as well as at the gateway side. And then, you could have your policy here, and then you just need to make sure you have the correct role at the gateway side for the tunnel to complete, as well as you need to have the appropriate VLAN assigned in the gateway role. So on the switch, reconnect here. So on the switch, the still the same zone UBT zone command that we'll have, still going to the IP. If you notice, I'm using the VLAN extend method, but I still have my UBT client VLAN put in there. If I do a show UBT, I can see my mode is set to, actually I'm using reserve VLAN right now. My mode is set to local VLAN, and so currently I'm using the local VLAN and I'm using 2000 as my client VLAN. So I'm going to go ahead and change this over to my VLAN extend. We still only support tunneling over the default VRF. Oops. I just need the UBT mode command. UBT mode, VLAN extend. So now I'm going to change the mode and do show UBT. So now I have my VLAN extend mode. Let me stop my traffic up here. Let me bounce my ports. Actually, I'll just re-authenticate. So we're going to go and clear all the clients. No, they're still trying to connect here. Let me stop all my protocols so I get a clean one here. Shut. Okay, those are cleared off. No shut. I'm using Ixia here. I'm just doing MAC authentication on my Ixia port here. I have 10 clients with different MAC addresses. So one set of MACs is getting an employee user role. The other set of MACs is getting a contractor user role. So then I can do a show port access clients, and I can see everything's been successfully downloaded, and it's specifying what VLAN they're using. If we see the VLAN column there, I can do a show UBT users all and see that all the tunnels are up and activated. Do a show UBT state. I can see that they are all registered appropriately with balanced out equally across the controllers. So they're all using the same GRE key because they're all on the same port. So it's similar to putting, a switch behind a port. If I had, if you're, for every port, you're going to have a unique key, because if you have multiple users behind a port, the gateway still is going to see it as one tunnel. But each port will have multiple tunnels across it as you balance out more and more users across the configuration. So then we can go take a look at the mobility gateway, and I can see the users over there as well. Oops. Why are they showing up? Oh, I don't have IPs. I don't know why they're not showing up with this. Oh, you know what? I bet it needs to be. That's right. This needs to get updated. Let me go to the CLI on the gateway. Yeah, I think we got a bug in the UI. There we go. So the tunnel node manager, tunneled users is your command for that. And so now we can see all our tunnels are up. So with the reserve VLAN method, you would see in parentheses, you would see the reserve VLAN that it's using, that it's coming in on to the gateway, and then the VLAN that's being assigned by the gateway role. So in this case, since we're using the VLAN extend method, the VLANs are the same coming from the switch to the gateway there. So that's how we can validate that all the tunnels are up correctly from the switch to the gateway. Other things that we want to check, that we may want to, verify, especially with so these are the commands I showed earlier. So the show UBT information, this will show you the bucket map, so the hashing of all the users for that. Show UBT statistics will give you all the statistics that you would need to see if you need to validate, make sure your heartbeats are running correctly between the switch and the gateway. Show, you do a show data path tunnel on the gateways, you can validate the tunnels that are up, so you can see all the tunnels that are going on that gateway, and then you can check the flags. As I showed earlier in the slides, you can check the flags to see what kind of tunnel that is. And you always want to look at decaps and endcaps to make sure that the tunnels are transmitting traffic correctly. So with that, I will turn it over to Yamini to go over troubleshooting. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Hello, Mehboob.
Yeah.
Mehboob, can you please share?
My name is my name is Mehboob, and I'm from UBT engineering team, and I will be going through the troubleshooting. Can you see my screen?
Yep,
Yes.
we can see it.
Thank you. Okay. Yeah. If it UBT is not working as expected, we need to troubleshoot it, and I will be going over the troubleshooting steps for the same. Yeah. In case UBT is not expected, the reasons can be broadly can be classified into three. Basically, one is switch is not registered on the gateway, or users are not registered on the gateway, and third one is we are seeing a traffic drop in the user traffic, which is tunneled to the gateways. Yeah, just go over. First, what we have to do is we have to see the UBT profile and config mode configuration on the switch. For that, what we can do is we can run the show running config UBT command, and in that we can check the mode whether it is set properly. VLAN extend mode is the a reset VLAN. This is actually the UBT 1.0 mode. And second one we have to see is the UBT profile, whether it's configured correctly. We need to have a primary controller IP, as well as it should be enabled. Backup controller IP configuration is optional. And also we need to see whether the source interface for the UBT is configured correctly on the switch. And for that, we can use the CLI, show IP source interface UBT. And on the switch, we can check like whether the user role is configured on the switch. Like here, for example, it is 300. We need to see whether we have configured VLAN 300 on the switch, which is part of the user role. And also we can check like in the user role whether the zone is mentioned correctly. Like here, the zone name is the UBT zone. And also we need to see whether the gateway role mentioned for the user is correct, like UBT gateway role. Next, what we have to do is we have to see the radius configuration as well as the gateway connectivity. What we can do, like we can ping the gateways, like that is configured as a primary IP address, primary gateway. We can ping them and check whether they are reachable from the switch, whether we have connectivity. And if we don't have a connectivity, basically the switch registration with the gateway will fail, and the show UBT state will not show as registered for those gateways, for that gateway. And also what we can do, we can ping the radius server from the switch and see whether it is reachable. And also we need to see whether the radius server configuration on the switch is correct, like whether the IP address we have mentioned correctly, as well as whether it is reachable. And also we need to see whether it is like actually, we can enable the tracking and see whether it's pinging. And also like we will be having clients will be connected to the access port on the switch. And we need to see whether the access port configuration on the switch is correct. For example, here the access switch configuration for the users is 1119. It has to be a secure port. For that, we need to enable authentication on that. Basically, a secure authentication on that. We need to set the client limit. By default, it will be 1. If you want more than 1, we need to set it. And also, we need to set the mode of authentication. We prefer MAC authentication .1 or both. Yeah. Next up, what we can see is whether like radius server or the CPPM, in that the role is configured correctly for the user. For example, I will take an example of free radius here. You can see like here the user MAC address is 001, and we need to check whether the role mentioned in that is correct, like UBT user role, and the same role, yeah, should be mentioned in the switch. This is in case of a static role. In case of a dynamic role, that role will be downloaded onto the switch. Second one is we have to see like the primary role configuration of the user on the switch, whether the gateway zone as well as user gateway role are mentioned properly. And in case the authentication on the switch fails for the user, maybe it may be because of radius server is not reachable, or maybe like there is a problem with the configuration of a user role or some other thing. Then you can see you can run the show port access clients command to see whether the authentication is successful, as well as it will it will show you the overall authorization status also. Here actually is a UVT is going to authorize the client after creating the tunnel for that. And in case authentication or authorization fails, the first step will be to check whether show port access clients is showing something as failure. And also like you can run the command show port access clients detail, and it will give you further details on that, like what failed actually, whether UBT has failed or some other thing, maybe VLAN is not configured, something like that. And the next one, what we have to see is on the gateway, we have to see whether the gateway role is configured. The user gateway role has to be configured on the gateway. Like here it is a UBT gateway role. It will be mentioned in the switch, but it should be configured on the gateway. And also the VLAN, the user VLAN, here the primary role VLAN on the switch as well as the gateway role VLAN in case of VLAN extend mode, it will be same, and it has to be configured on the switch as well as the gateway. Here I'm showing this is the command actually for to check on the gateway. And I'll go through some of the useful commands on the gateway. Like basically, once the switch registers itself on the gateway, that can be seen on the gateway or can be confirmed by this command, show tunnel node manager tunneled nodes. It will actually list the MAC address of the switch as well as the IP address of the switch. Also, it will tell actually like what is if you configure some host name, it will come here or it will come as the model. as well as it will say that this is the switch anchor controller for the switch. Like if you can see here flags, this will indicate if it is A means it's a active switch anchor controller for that switch. This is the gateway, and U is nothing but it's also a user anchor controller for some users. And also if you have X here, basically it says it's a standby user anchor controller for some other user. And also in case of VLAN extend mode, you will not see this C flag here. But in case of the earlier mode, the local VLAN or reserved VLAN mode, you will be seeing this along with these three things. You'll be seeing a C option here, which indicates that gateway is going to take care of broadcast as multicast traffic, and it will be going to convert the unicast, and there is no multicast tunnel in reserved VLAN mode. But in this case, there will be a multicast tunnel. And also, along with the active SSC, you will be having a standby SSC also. On that, if you just issue this command, it will show the switch there, but it will say show with the flag yes, saying that it's a standby SSC switch anchor controller for the switch. And it will be a user anchor controller if user is tunneled to it's a active UAC for that user. And also it will say like whether it's a standard for something. And the second one is basically if you want to see the users on the gateway, we can issue the command show tunnel node manager tunneled users. It will show all the users being tunneled to that gateway, and you can see its username. We can see its MAC address. Also, like you can see the user role VLAN in case of VLAN extend mode. In case of reserved VLAN, it will be the reserved VLAN here. And also you can see if you see that it's UTA. U means it's a active user controller for this user, and its traffic right now is being tunneled to this one. And if you see the second row, it's saying that for this user, this active controller is a standby. And also on the standby, you can see the reverse thing. And also here the tunnel index it will show, and also it will show the GRE key. Yeah, the useful command in case of there is a traffic drop on the controller side, that will be the show data per tunnel table command. Here you can see in case of UBT VLAN extend mode, as I told you already, we will be having three types of tunnels created on the gateway to support the UBT feature. One is the USC tunnel, the user data tunnel itself. The type will be it will be having a GRE key of the port of the switch. This will be this. Consider if the uplink MTU is more than 5000, it will show it here, which will communicate during user registration on the switch. And the second one is nothing but for the heartbeats. That will be a heartbeat tunnel. You can see the type of it will be a deed. Type of it will be a deed. And in case it's a VLAN extend mode, there will be a tunnel called multicast tunnel. You can figure it out from basically the type will be beta. And here actually the switch source IP address is 63 here, whichever I have used. These are the 1, 2, 3, 4 tunnels are there. Yeah. And the other useful command, which I already told you, show tunnel node manager trace buff. Basically here actually whenever a switch registers itself, you can see here initially once the switch registers onto the gateway, you can see something like switch bootstrap request coming here. It will be a request and it will show the MTU size also. After that a controller gateway will do some processing, and after that it will respond back with the acknowledgement. And if you see something SBY 57 here, that means it is giving it's a cluster and it is giving the standby SSC controller also gateway also along with the response. Normally in case of cluster, switch bootstrap response will have node list as well as bucket map, which is not shown here, but it will be sent. And also whenever the user registration happens on the gateway, it happens only after the switch registration. And that request will look like this, user bootstrap request. And here if the mode reserved VLAN is 0 means it's a VLAN extend mode. In case of reserved VLAN mode, it will have that reserved VLAN. And here actually the user role that is set by the role VLAN that is set by the switch is VLAN 300, and this is the key, actually like a port, like GRE key, and this is the gateway role it has sent, and also what is the MTU size, as well as like after this, the gateway is going to acknowledge the user registration request, or it is going to reject it, and also like it will tell which VLAN he has assigned on the gateway. And also in case it has assigned a standby USC controller, it will show it here, and also to show whether success or failure. This is a very useful command on the controller to see whether like a switch registration or a user registration has failed, or maybe if consider example there is a license issue, it will show it here. Yeah, and there is one more command, like you if you want to see, like you can issue show data by breach, and you can include your MAC address here. It will show basically like this is the user role VLAN. This is also assigned VLAN on the gateway. Also, like the tunnel traffic will be coming on some other VLAN, that it will show which VLAN it is coming through and which port it is coming through on the gateway. Yeah. Whatever I explained so far, like basically like how to troubleshoot it, I have put it in a flowchart format. This we can be used. It just can be referred. Basically, first we have to, after the configuration, we have to see showability state output. If like the gateways come as registered, that means the switch registration with the gateway has gone through perfectly. If it is not, then we have to check these things. We have to see the configuration on the switch, uplink, connectivity to the gateways, as well as, and we have to see the license on the gateway. Second is nothing but the user registration on the gateway. If it happens correctly, that will be shown by show UBT users all command. If it gives some error, then we need to see whether there is a problem with the authentication, or there is a problem with the authorization with these two commands, as well as we need to see whether the Redis server is reachable or not. Second one is like considered like user registration has gone through, and not all user traffic is being tunneled. For that, we can see like whether the user MAC is learned on the switch with the command show MAC address details on the switch. And also we can see like whether user role as well as gateway is configured correctly on the switch, as well as we can check whether the gateway role is configured on the gateway along with the VLAN. Here VLAN is very much important on the switch. User role VLAN should be configured on the switch as well as gateway. And we can see like also other things like basically, and also we need to see like if we are not able to authenticate more than one user on a port, we have to see the client limit on the port, access port.
Thanks, Yamini, for going over troubleshooting with us. That was really beneficial.